Jacksonville. A child was born who couldn't sit still. 86 years later with no regret. You know that man can't sit still yet. The Great Depression couldn't get him down. He worked for his dad's store in town, collecting money in small amounts for poor whites and blacks in their furniture accounts. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. As he'd collect, he'd talk to folks. He'd hear legends, tales, songs, and jokes. Now this fine treasure he'd record and write. He was colorblind, didn't see black and white. Writer's project for the WPA. Zora Neale Hurston, he earned his pay. Crackers and blacks, they talk for hours. It was a barefoot history, this land of flowers.
From WBRN Radio in Boston and on the Boston Red Network, the week that was. On the 19th of August, as we get set for another one of these so-called speech rallies at the Common in Boston, which is the oldest park in the country. The police, our authorities, have taken precautions. Roughly 500 coppers will be on the street. Side streets to the Common will be closed. So in other words, the situation is different from Charlotte. This is a different group out here, and conditions have changed. Some of the things that have occurred, one of the principal sponsors, gangs that were involved in Charlotte and subsequently in the murder of Heber Heyer. The Daily Stormer has been, as they say, stormed off the net. Their domain was canceled by a number of players, GoDaddy, but they were forced to do it by what they saw as a public response to this. And then Google and then several other operations. They then moved to a RU domain. Now whether they're there or not, who knows, because again, there's DNS problems there with in many of these domains. But they went from being one of the number one destinations, there'd be some arguments there, as to who is or who is not of these so-called groups at the alt-right, and these fascist groups. There are roughly 300,000 or so people that checked in. Now, how many of these people are hardcore followers? Very difficult to determine. The outlet Vice, V-I-C-E, did a documentary, and it went on to Facebook, looked at a little bit of it, and we'll talk about the character that was there that is now known as a weeping fascist. But these are some of the things that happened. And of course, Bannon being banished from the White House, he said that he, in fact, resigned on the 7th of August. Is that a big deal? No, but symbolically, it's more so than it is from a operational standpoint. He was the senior strategist for Trump's America First program. But there are others there. Miller is still there, his principal speechwriter, who is a fascist and advisor. And there are many more. And the Washington Post talked about some of the targets, the three Jewish people that were there. Mr. Cohen, Dr. Cohen, the Council of Economic Advisors, the chief economic planner, let's say, there, and the I believe Treasury Secretary there, Mention, how he pronounces his name, from a former right-wing congressman from the Carolinas. Did not know he was there, but Dana Milback, and we'll go to his article on those three and why they should resign also. But now we'll hear from the mayor of Boston, Mayor Walsh, and his take from WECN. Let me see if we can get this in. The mayor, violence will not be tolerated at a free speech rally there. Here in our city, no doubt about that. There's a different situation, but the planning is there. The planning in Charlotte was willy-nilly.
We have team coverage of the preparations for tomorrow. Abby Nisgoda has more on the precautions being taken by local businesses. Alicia Palumbo talked to the MBTA today about what it's expecting crowd-wise. And Michael Rosenfield is in Boston, where an interfaith service is being held ahead of the event. But let's begin with Eli Rosenberg. He's live on the Common with more on the message city leaders have for everyone coming in tomorrow. Eli?
Yeah, after a week of planning, it really all comes down to this. Within the last few minutes, saw a number of police officers walking around, pointing at things, talking amongst themselves. Now, the mayor and police chief said they really never wanted this event to happen, but they had no choice. So with it happening tomorrow, they're really taking no chances. Hundreds of police officers here, and if all goes to plan, the two sides will never meet. The opposition to the coalition, well, they're going to be in this area, then across the park, past this path, trees and fence. Well, that is where the coalition is going to be set up for the rally tomorrow afternoon. Piece by piece, the fencing went up as Boston police continue to get ready for Saturday's rally and counter protests.
I just think the rhetoric has really brought this to a different level, and that's what we're worried about. I've never seen so many people almost looking for confrontation.
In addition to the fencing, surveillance cameras went up today over the bandstand the Boston Free Speech Coalition will use tomorrow. This afternoon, Boston Police Commissioner William Evans getting a closer look.
Folks have had a week to work on this. The scenario planning has been quite extensive.
500 plus police officers will be on hand, some undercover, others on foot and bike. A security plan for an event the city says it never wanted.
I absolutely would not have given them a permit if I didn't have to give them a permit. We don't need that type of rhetoric going on in Boston Common. We've come too far.
Sky Ranger giving us our first look at the route where tens of thousands are expected to protest the Boston Free Speech Coalition's event tomorrow. From the Reggie Lewis Center, then a 2-mile walk before eventually arriving at the Common.
I'm a little disturbed that I've seen posters around the city asking people to bring bottles and throw bottles at the protesters. That won't be tolerated.
If you're looking to start trouble, regardless who you are tomorrow, don't come to Boston. We don't want you here.
Now, if you are coming out here tomorrow, long list of restrictions on what you can and cannot bring. Police ask you not to bring large bags. And as you'd expect, a lot of street closings as well, everything from Beacon to Charles Street around the park. That rally set for 12 to 2 tomorrow. Live in the park, Eli Rosenberg, NBC Boston.
Eli, thank you. And while people are being urged to stay away from the Common, those who do make the trip will find several businesses shut down, while other shop owners will be keeping a wary eye on those crowds. NBC Boston's Abby Nisgoda continues our team coverage from Boston.
If you think of it, we got it.
Rain or shine, you can find it at this push cart near Park Street.
If it's not snowing or it's not 25 degrees, we'll come out here.
You just won't find it here tomorrow.
Our order to the police, we're not allowed to come out.
All of the park's vendors and performers told us stay away Saturday in light of the rally and the protests. News that is not music to the ears of tourists.
We're hoping to see Boston before that happens and then
leave. The frog pond will be closed, and so too will the swan boats.
We will also be closed on Saturday, August 19th, because of security concerns related to the rally on the Boston Common.
The first time in history they've shut down for a non-weather event.
It's really too bad because these are for kids. Very famous book written about them, and it's really kind of sad that it's not going to happen.
But no matter what happens, the workers at Black Seed Cafe on Tremont Street say they'll be here with food and a message.
We are open, yes. We don't want to be intimidated by what's happening.
We're told most of the walking tours that go through this park will be canceled tomorrow. The duck boats, though, will run as normal. In Boston, I'm Abby Nesgoda, NBC Boston.
Abby, thank you very much. With several streets closed to traffic and parking around the Common and along and around the protest route, the MBTA is now bracing for a heavy day of ridership. NBC Boston's Alicia Palumbo live now outside the Boylston Street T-stop with more on how that system is now preparing. Alicia.
Well, the MBTA says all T stations normally open on the weekends will be open tomorrow, even during the rally and counter protests, even here on the Common, including Boylston Street Station here and Park Street Station up the street. But the T says violence will not be tolerated.
It's all about hate or about violence. Stay home.
As Boston residents and even city officials urge everyone to stay away from Boston Common Saturday during the much anticipated free speech rally and counter protests, MBTA police say they are ready for the expected influx of riders.
We will have a full complement of officers in the 3 districts, as well as additional officers designated to the stations in and around the event zone.
I feel safer because of that. It's important, having, public safety, and the extra police presence really makes a difference.
With several road closures around Boston Common, including Tremont Street and the Common Garage closed, many people are expected to use public transportation to get to the rally and protests.
I'm going to take the public transportation. That's the simplest way to get in, because it's going to be nowhere. It's going to be impossible to try to park anywhere.
But it probably will be a little crazy, so people should be expecting to wait for multiple trains, and it's going to be packed.
Police say they will be monitoring the public safety cameras throughout the area and deploy officers to MBTA stations as needed.
To get a gauge of what's going on so we can gather more intel and to get a gauge of the mood of the crowd.
Now, the T says it doesn't have any bag or sign restrictions, but it urges riders to be aware of the items that are prohibited from the rally and to not bring them on the T. We're live on Boston Common. Alicia Palumbo, NBC Boston.
JC, rows and rows of fencing are already in place. We've even seen some Boston police officers in this area on standby. This entire area is going to be packed with thousands of people, and city leaders say they're ready. A security plan in place for an event the city of Boston says it doesn't even want.
I absolutely would not have given them a permit if I didn't have.
The city has prepared for this so-called free speech rally. This has been a tactic throughout the country. You had them in Berkeley, of course. The murder event down in Charlottesville, Virginia, that is a, as they say, model for this to happen, period. And now what will happen, adjustments obviously will be made. And the counter-protesters will march from Roxbury down to the Common. They expect as many as 20 or 30,000 people to join that protest. Now, they will have undercover operatives from the Boston PD will be there, and they will be part of the also state police, the Commonwealth, a new division that focuses on counter-terrorism will be there also. So there will be a better situation. No sticks and weapons will be permitted. They're large bags. So they'll be watching out for these. So we advise people not to bring those kinds of things in. And as said before, sections of Tremont Street and some adjoining streets will be closed. The common garage also will be closed, and parking in and around the common will be prohibited. So not have any more fields type operations there. Will be a totally different situation and response to it. Now, how many people that actually show up as a free speech coalition, one does not know. But the counter people will be there. The Boston Free Speech Coalition said its rally on Saturday has nothing to do with white nationalism. They are not affiliated with organizers. Well, naturally they would say that, but nonetheless, we'll see what will happen there. Beacon Street, Boston Street, Charles Street South from Tremont. Now, they will start towing at 6 a.m. These are some of the streets: Columbus, Malcolm X Boulevard. They're also in Tremont from Malcolm X Boulevard to Charles Street. And complete list of prohibited stuff, firearms, knives. So you won't see any militias there, sharp objects, shields, or fireworks. Pop-up tents or canopies, can and glass containers, pre-mixed beverages, alcohol beverages, wagons and carts, let's see, coolers, drones, pets, grills, propane tanks and open flames, bicycles. They've just about added everything that you could possibly add to the list of prohibited items there. So this is one that they are actually taking as much time as needed to prepare. They've had a week to prepare. The law enforcement agencies in Boston and in the Commonwealth, and no doubt also federal agencies. Now, this is Professor Reich, out of Berkeley. He posted this up, a new situation here. Of course, you'll have these types of operations from the Times. The Antifa, as they call themselves, ANTIFA, as a left-wing faction set to and literally fight the white supremacists and Nazis. This is in the New York Times on the 17th. And many of these people, last weekend, a 27-year-old bike messenger showed up at the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia. He came ready for battle. He joined a human chain that stretched in front of Emancipation Park. Linked to his arms with others, blocked waves of white supremacists, some of them in full Nazi regalia, from entering the park. As soon as they got closer, the young man who declined to give his real name, Frank Sabate, after the famous Spanish anarchists, they started swinging clubs, fists, shields. I'm not embarrassed to say that we were not shy in defending ourselves. Well, the right of self-defense is no doubt there, and if they're in the regalia, the Nazi regalia, those things do happen. And this is the reality of 2017. Sabate, an adherent of a controversial force. This is from the Times. On the left, known as the is a combined term of the anti-fascist. Describes a loose-knit coalition of activists out there that have come in because of the alt-right, that is various fascist groups that are energized by DJ Trump. One has to understand that under the 8 years of Barack Obama, these groups were very energized. They were not in the streets, but at the time, the Daily Storm and various other people of that ilk were recruiting people, no doubt about it. And this is what brought that out. And if you go back to the 2008 presidential campaign that pitted then Senator Obama out of Illinois against Hillary the Monster Clinton, one of the most racist campaigns ever, and eventually on the Republican side, the old man McCain out of Arizona and Sarah Palin. And their particular campaign meetings, rallies, whatever you want to call them, were held on private property. This is the GOP. And as H pointed out, the backbone of this operation, the fascist operation, you want slash alt-right, etc., it could not run without the Republican Party. That in itself is what the facts are. That combined with them and various other of their ilk, about 40%, and that's basically what DJ Trump is running. If the Republican Party disappeared from that coalition, his approval rating would be less than 10%. That is the fact itself, the shuffling of the deck, that the White House has nothing on this. Now, what has changed is these groups have been spotlighted now that they're out in the open. Some of their members are on the run, quite literally, hiding. One fellow was crying. Another fellow claimed his life was ruined at 21. He hadn't even gotten started yet. And one of the participants here in the Antifa, people are starting to understand that the neo-fascists don't care if you're quiet or if you are peaceful. No doubt about that. Who became a symbol of movement in April when a white nationalist leader punched her in the face during a melee that was in Berkeley. That also happened in Charlottesville, Virginia. One of those people punched a young woman in the face. She went after him, chasing him down the road, throwing punches at him, and he was in a retreat. And that is the scenario there. Now, we are against violence, just straight up. That is from Heidi Barich, director of the Southern Poverty Law Center Intelligence Project. Well, the unfortunate problem is they are against it, but at the same time, those of us that have been in demonstrations, it comes your way. Whether or not you are preparing for it or not, you really don't have a choice. You have to defend yourself out there. And in the case of the fascists, they were out there with all kinds of apparatus. They had the militias out there with the guns. They had pipes, brass knuckles. I mean, they had all kinds of things out there that they were throwing at people and hitting people and beating people with sticks. It was a kind of unfortunate situation you had there. So this is one of the kinds of things here. But this portrays them as being secretive without official leaders. Well, they don't need to have official leaders driven by a rage of political passions, anti-capitalism, environmentalists, and so forth, and so on. And various other coalitions here, what by any means necessary coalition formed more than decades to protest the ban out in California on affirmative action. This is not something that is new. Now, according to a professor at Drexel University, that's in Philadelphia, who counts himself as both an anti-follower and a scholar on the movement, says it's not a single origin story. The group is an antecedent in Europe, especially in Germany and Italy, where it's easily followers trade shots with the Nazis in the earlier followers, with the Nazis in the 30s and fight against Bettino Mussolini. Black Shirt's more recent history has roots in straight-edge punk rock scene, anti-global protests in the 90s, and the Occupy movements all over the place. The closest thing the anti-fads may have to guiding principles is that its ideology, it identifies as fascist based upon a belief in genetic inferiority cannot be reasoned with and must be physically resisted. Its adherents express a disdain for mainstream liberal politics. Now, this is one of the situations that's happening. We saw that out in Washington State in the mayoral race we covered out there between the three candidates. One, Hillary Clinton Durkin, a Hillary Clinton clone out there, and a liberal candidate there also, Ms. Moon, and the People's candidate, Nikita Oliver, and her People's Party. And when it was all over, Ms. Moon made the runoff against the established candidate, Durkin. We don't know how that will play out in Seattle, in the mayor's race out in Seattle. But the situation is the landscape has changed. You have the black shirts here, Benito Mussolini's type of operation, the fascists. They are alive now. Obviously, they don't have the numbers that they had there, but we don't know because they are operating on the Star Chamber. But this is out here. Their existence itself is violent and dangerous. This is from Frank Sabate. And so I don't think using force or violence to oppose them is unethical. Well, it's not an ethical situation here, and this is something the older people need to understand, period. This is a different type of situation, and as the one of the movement type people said, it happened in Charlotte, that he would have been toast, and the ministers would have been toast, not for these people. So that is a situation out there that happens, and people need to reassess where they are, period. Strongholds, of course, in the Bay Area, the Pacific Northwest, Philadelphia. The Berkeley campus has been a particular hotbed for Antifa activity, and university officials have criticized the group. Well, the whole problem is, why is it caused? You have to go down to the cause of this, and you start looking at who these people are. Sites like the Daily Stormer, etc. there, and with more than 4,000 followers, added to a total of over 23,000, who runs It's a Going Down. Interest in the site has sparked there. So again, this is part of the reality of 2017. As H said today, the belief that there are danger signs in the American nation. There's no doubt about that. But the American people have survived this. If you recall, for those that were around in the 40s or in the late 30s, the fascist movements were alive and well. The brown shirts in America, when the American nation was fighting fascism in Europe. And the fascists basically never went away. They were always there, and they came back in the form of the Republican Party. So in other words, this is not in a vacuum. And people have to understand from a political standpoint what is actually going on here. Without the Republican Party, these the alt-right people, whether it be Bannon, Miller, and this fringe of the Trump administration, would not be in business. Period. So you have all these characters out here, the Proud Boys, that's what's this, a conservative fraternity of Western chauvinists that said the anti-furs have done itself no favors by assuming that its enemies all share the same views. Well, the whole point there is that not only do they share the same views, but there is a generic pattern amongst the fascists, white supremacists, what have you. Now, are they unified behind one ideology? No, they're competitive voices that are there, and they are competing for not only funds, but they're also competing for what is membership. Now, the Berkeley side here, this is the hot dog type worker resigns after the nationalist rally. The hot dog said this is some character got exposed in Charlottesville, Virginia. Name is Cole White, and Mr. White resigned there. He's not pushing hot dogs in Berkeley at the Top Dog anymore. Had on August 13th had fired this character from the Top Dog. Released a statement saying who attended. This is a fella resigned from his job following reports of involvement in the protest. Another Top Dog worker previously told the paper, this is the Berkeley side, that he had been fired. Well, whether he was fired or not, he is, as they say, not there, period. So again, this is one of the things that that happens, period. A little side note, April Ryan, she's been around for a long time, at the press conferences, she is hammering at Trump for going after an African-American CEO. This is a CEO at Merck, Kenneth Frazier, after he left the business coalition. But business has fled the various Trump committees. He had resolved them in that business has decided that they cannot be identified here with the DJ Trump administration. Even the religious types have now fled. Let me just, and we'll go to Uncle Carl Robe here, spend a little time on this. This is the faith advisor here, citing deep conflicts of value between him and the administration. This is an African American, the largest mega church in New York, A.B. Bernard. He's a pastor of a church, announced on a Friday he is leaving there. Also, my statement regarding my resignation of the President's Evangelical Advisory Council, period. So Dr. Bernard is now gone. Some of these characters are still around. They even brought old Ralph Reed out. He's been around since, as LBJ would say, Christ was a corporal. The Faith and Freedom Coalition, another Trump supporter. This is part of the Republican Party. Ralph Reed, mythical 40%. They will be around forever. Let me just do a little wrap up here with the Washington Post. Bannon is gone. We don't need to go back and get that particular thing. He's gone back to what he calls his weapon at Burt Bar. His machine, not his fascist killing machine, but his machine for fascism, we'll call it. Now, the story here, this fellow that was in the Vice video and went to HBO, Chris Cantwell, he's the fellow that's known as a crying fascist there because he started crying, period. And he had a slogan that was featured in there along with the hot dog bender. He's a weeping Nazi. He was even banned from OkCupid, and that's a dating site, who became the ivory-skinned, gun-toting star of the Charlottesville documentary. Hyle Cantwell, as he called it. This is the Vice News and HBO documentary there last weekend, which has been seen by 30 million times, period. And these were the ones that were running in the torchlight parade about the General Robert E. Lee screaming, "Jews will not replace us." Well, maybe not, but he is now on the run. Looked at that There were, in fact, felony warrants out for him. The Globe reported later for the use of illegal gas injured by chemical explosions. The University of Virginia cops did not reply. And this is what his whole thing was. He even claimed Chelsea Manning was going to curb stump the Nazis. Chelsea Manning is about 5'2" or 3. So, I mean, this is outrageous here. He's from Keene, New Hampshire, a center, no doubt, of many white supremacists. Remember in 2008, the primary there, when the candidate Barack Obama lost New Hampshire, was not a surprise to us, given the types of people that were running there. Let me do Milbrandt's, a little bit of Milbrandt's article here that we looked at yesterday. We're going a little bit over here, and we can find him from Ide Dion, Trump's populism was a ruse. Bannon's ouster proves it. Well, we'll get to that at a later date here. I'm seeing if we can find this. I thought we had it up in advance of the program here, but I'm assuming we did not. Dana Milbrandt's article about the various people within the Trump coalition that were falling apart as quickly as they could. Now, these were the Treasury, the economic advisor, etc. There that have all. Incidentally, Carl Icahn has quit also as a special advisor. Conflict of interest got old Carl and not something else. So, in other words, people are quitting left and right, falling apart in the Trump White House, around the Trump White House, for various causes. Period. So this story will continue on. We spent a little time talking about developments that have come out. We'll have a full report, incidentally, on the so-called freedom of speech march in Boston, around the Common, the demonstrators that are coming out of Roxbury. Let's go to Uncle Carl Rove, and then we'll do the sports here. He's writing in the Wall Street Journal, DJ Trump can't win the blame game. Like many conflicts, the tilt between, the Senate leader Mitch McConnell and President Trump began with a seemingly inconsequential remark in a speech to a Rotary Club that was in northern Kentucky. McConnell said the president has shown excessive expectations about how quick things happen in the democratic process, i.e. for Washington. This is accurate. Trump frequently says things like, we are moving very quickly, referring to the Health Care Act that was in February the 27th. We're going to take tax reform, and at some point very soon, that was on April 12th, probably was on April Fool's Day, that his administration infrastructure plan will take off like a rocket ship. Well, this is just rhetoric. Rhetoric has been around way before DJ Trump got into the White House. Also plays down the difficulty of legislating, as when he declared in March that repeal and replace of Obamacare would be such an easy one. He told Fox News about that. Rather than ignoring McConnell's observation, however, the president scorned him with a barrage of fiery tweets. Shortly thereafter, he piled on in a news conference, publicly blaming McConnell for coming up with one vote short on repeal. If that's not enough, Trump came close to calling the majority leader to step down when he was asked by reporters whether he would like McConnell to resign. Trump implied that if the senator couldn't pull off health care reform, tax reform, and the infrastructure bill, a very easy one, he would revisit the question. Blaming others can be may be cathartic for Trump, but it weakens the presidency and inhibits his agenda. Republicans respond to the president's criticism with a flurry of statements in support of their leader. If Trump continues to attack congressional Republicans, the GOP will lose its majority in the House and the Senate in 2018. Well, the problem is the wheels are already spinning now, and they've been spinning for quite some time. The outcome might be welcomed by fringe elements in the party whose primary interest is defeating the so-called establishment rather than advocating sound policies. The problem here with the policies are not sound. It would be a tremendous defeat for Trump if the Democrats capture majorities in the Congress. No doubt about that. The Trump train would be standing on the rail, and from the West Coast would come the Soul Train, and Maxine Waters would be behind would be the engineer, and there would definitely be problems there. His agenda would be obstructed, his judicial nominees stymied, his administration would be buried in congressional subpoenas, stuck in front of ugly oversight hearings for 2 years. Well, the situation is that 2018 will be a bellwether, no doubt about that. Very difficult to assess. Now, if the events of the past week had occurred in August of 2018, the Republican Party would be toast in November. But they have a year to recoup. So where are the administration's focused efforts to use the president's megaphone to explain the GOP's agenda and persuade voters? An early morning tweet may rally true believers, but the 140 characters won't sway most Americans and may even repel them. Where the speeches explaining the plan to replace Obamacare, those speeches have been given and given and given for the last 7 years. You can't put that on DJ Trump. Where the Oval Office address on tax reform, that has been talked about. Various tax schemes have been out there. The course is echoing the president's arguments for an infrastructure bill. They're nowhere to be found. Well, he talked about infrastructure during the campaign, and he talked about infrastructure there. That is not the issue. The issue is their policy is fogged up. It first was fogged up by the investigation of the election. Now it is focused on the murder of Heather Heyer in Charlottesville. It devotes just 314 words to outlining its provision. That's the Trump's program. As a reference point, that is fewer than half the words in this column. Not enough for a major piece of legislation that's talking about infrastructure. But the infrastructure scheme of a DJ Trump is nothing more than a private sector, toll roads, etc., ripoff. That is all it is, and we can leave it at that, and or let it alone. There's no doubt about that. Period. The LA Dodgers have acquired Chris Granderson from the Mets. Mets are going nowhere. The Dodgers want to go to the World Series. Justin Brill joins, Michael Bennett in the national anthem protest that goes on. Howie Long's son also joined in those protests. Those protests will continue, and next week Spike Lee will be leading a protest at the NFL headquarters in New York. So you're going to see more and more of this out there. And for those that are not going to NFL games, we'll talk about that on the Monday Morning Quarterback. Let's quickly go into the scores here from Friday night. well, we'll go as quickly as we can. Nonetheless, the Blue Jays were in Wrigley Field. Cubs 7-4 there. The Cubs need to win a game. The loser was A.J. Hemp. And the winner, Mr. Arnetta, excuse me. Nonetheless, let's see. The Angels were at the Orioles in Camden Yard. Orioles 9-7. The Cards were in Pittsburgh. Cards 11-10. The Cards needed Mr. Martinez was the winner. The Yankees were in Fenway Park. Red Sox 9-6. The Red Sox need to win something also. The L.A. Dodgers were in the Motor City. 8-5. Dodgers over the Tigers. The Marlins were in New York. Marlins 3-1. The Mariners were in Florida. Tampa Bay to be precise. Mariners 7-1. The Reds were in Atlanta, and they drove Old Dixie down 5-3. The White Sox were in Texas. Sox 4-3 over the Rangers. The D-backs were in the Twin Cities. 10-3 was the score. Twins over Arizona. The Athletics were in Houston. Houston 3-1. Cleveland was in Kansas City. Cleveland 10-1 in that contest. The Brewers were in Denver. Rockies 8-4. The Nationals were in San Diego. 7-1 the score there. Nationals. And finally, the Phillies were out in San Francisco. 10-2 was the score there. Giants over the Phillies, and that does it for a Major League Baseball. It will do it for us. Remember to be safe at the so-called free speech rally at the Common. The counter rally coming out of Roxbury, I think it's about 2 miles there, 2.5 kilometers, into that area. They will be cordoned off, and one needs to use a certain amount of discretion, no doubt about that. Nonetheless, we'll see you on the Monday Morning Quarterback, and also we'll see you on Numbers Man. That's our macroeconomic program this weekend, and the Open Source Report. That's our technical program. We'll talk about so-called free speech, the Internet, the domain ouster of these various fascist groups, and how that impacts the Internet from the Electronic Foundation organization. There is an article there. We will append that. Have a good weekend, everyone. We'll talk to you on the Monday Morning Quarterback as the political program Boston Red. Good day.